The Power of Owning Your Narrative: How Black Women Transform Pain into Prosperity. If you're not telling your story, someone else is telling it for you. Those words aren't just a catchy phrase, they're a battle cry, a declaration of independence, a revolution waiting to happen. I recently had the profound privilege of interviewing Pharice Brown, a visionary whose life's work embodies what happens when Black women refuse to let others define their narrative. Pharice isn't just building businesses, she's reconstructing the very foundation of how stories from marginalized communities reach the world. Her work at Pain to Prosperity Publishing has created a sanctuary where authentic Black voices can flourish, unfiltered and uncompromised. In a world that routinely silences and erases Black women's experiences, Pharice stands as a beacon of resistance, resilience, and revolutionary change. Think about this for a moment. How many times have you seen someone else's version of your community story dominate the conversation? How many times have you watched as the nuance, the beauty, the complexity of Black women's experiences get flattened into stereotypes, or worse, erased entirely? This isn't just about representation, this is about liberation. When Ferris founded Pain to Prosperity Publishing in Prince George's County, Maryland, she wasn't just creating another business, she was building an ark, a vessel designed to carry authentic voices through the flood of misrepresentation that drowns out so many Black and Brown authors in traditional publishing. The publishing industry has long been a gatekeeper, determining which stories deserve to be told and which don't. The statistics are staggering. Less than 5% of children's books feature Black characters. Less than 2% of traditionally published authors are Black. When your story is systematically excluded, what message does that send about your worth, your relevance, your very existence? Ferris refused to accept this reality. Instead, she created an alternative, a publishing house where authenticity isn't just permitted, but prioritized, where editorial practices ensure authors' voices remain unfiltered, where works like You're a Bad Wife Because You Can't Clean the House challenge toxic expectations while sparking honest dialogue about identity. This isn't just business. This is a personal revolution. But Ferris's story doesn't begin with publishing. Long before she was amplifying voices through books, she was demonstrating what servant leadership looks like in crisis. As part of FEMA's emergency management teams during Hurricanes Irma, Maria, and Harvey, Pharisee confronted a harsh reality. Disasters disproportionately devastate low income Black communities that lack resources or political influence. The systems designed to help often become labyrinths of bureaucracy that delay critical aid. What did she do? She transformed those systems from within, implemented streamlined communication protocols, managed logistics so survivors received timely support, advocated internally for equitable resource allocation. The result? Families received faster relief services, staff morale increased. A model of compassionate disaster response emerged that's now cited by other federal departments seeking more equitable outcomes. This is what happens when leadership is rooted in service rather than self interest, when empathy drives decision making, when the goal isn't just efficiency, but dignity. And these weren't qualities Ferris developed overnight. They were seeds planted early, nurtured through years of community advocacy. As vice president of Bladensburg High School's Youth Against Homelessness, in America, a young Pharice was already organizing drives for local shelters while advocating for increased public library funding during budget cuts that disproportionately impacted majority minority neighborhoods outside DC. She mobilized classmates through food and toy drives tied directly to graduation requirements, ensuring every student contributed meaningfully, regardless of socioeconomic background. She lobbied school board members using data driven presentations, highlighting disparities between her community and wealthier districts. This wasn't just teenage activism, this was the foundation of a lifelong commitment to transforming systems from the inside out. What emerges from these stories, from Pharisee's journey, are three profound truths that have the power to transform not just individual lives, but entire communities. First, your story is power. Own it and share it. When Black women claim their narratives, they create space, not just for personal healing, but for collective liberation. Ferris's journey from community organizer to federal emergency manager to publishing entrepreneur demonstrates that telling your story isn't self indulgence, it's an act of resistance against erasure. The most disrespected person in America is the Black woman, Malcolm X once said. Part of that disrespect manifests as silencing, as the systematic dismissal of Black women's voices, experiences, and wisdom. By founding Pain to Prosperity Publishing, Ferris created a platform where Black women's stories aren't just told, but celebrated, where the Paradigm Value series became spiritual guides used in classrooms to foster critical thinking among youth, where new generations of storytellers find their voice. Second, leadership rooted in service creates lasting change. True leadership isn't measured by titles or volume, but by service, resilience, and the ability to elevate others. Ferris's work at FEMA proves that leading with empathy and intention builds trust, transforms organizations, and uplifts entire communities. During those hurricanes, when chaos threatened to overwhelm systems designed to help, Ferris didn't just manage logistics, she infused emergency operations with humanity. Drawing on decades of cross sector experience and her personal understanding of what it means to feel unseen, she ensured that compassion remained central to crisis response. This approach earned her recognition within FEMA for boosting team effectiveness under pressure, while maintaining dignity centered service delivery models across diverse populations. More importantly, it set precedents for how federal agencies approach disaster response, creating ripples that continue to impact communities long after the immediate crisis passes. Third, transforming pain into purpose fuels innovation. Perhaps most powerfully, Ferris's life embodies the principle that adversity can be a catalyst for creativity and entrepreneurship. Her publishing company amplifies marginalized voices precisely because she understands pain as fertile ground for growth. The very name, Pain to Prosperity, encapsulates this philosophy. It's not about denying suffering or pretending oppression doesn't exist. It's about refusing to let pain have the final word. It's about alchemizing struggle into strength, trauma into triumph, obstacles into opportunities. For Black women facing systemic barriers or personal setbacks, this message resonates deeply. Your challenges can become blueprints for prosperity if you choose transformation over stagnation. Now, imagine for a moment a world where more people embrace these principles, where storytelling became a tool for liberation rather than oppression, where leadership centered service rather than self aggrandizement, where pain became the raw material for innovation rather than an excuse for inaction. What would that world look like? It would be a world where authentic narratives dismantle stereotypes rather than reinforce them, where organizations led with compassion become hubs, not just for profit, but for healing and innovation, where communities transform collective trauma into shared prosperity through intentional mentorship pipelines modeled after Pain to Prosperity publishing. It would be a world where barriers rooted in outdated beliefs about who gets heard or whose pain counts would erode as more people saw vulnerability not as a weakness, but as fuel for greatness. This isn't fantasy, this is possibility. And it begins with one simple act: telling your story. As Maya Angelou wisely observed, there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. When Black women break their silence, when they refuse to let others define their narrative, they don't just liberate themselves, they create permission for others to do the same. This is why Pharice's work matters so profoundly. It's not just about publishing books or managing emergencies or organizing community initiatives. It's about modeling what happens when Black women refuse to be defined by others' limitations. So I challenge you today: stand in your truth. Claim your narrative. Tell your story with all its messy, beautiful complexity. Because in a world that profits from your silence, speaking becomes an act of rebellion. And if you're not Black, if you're not a woman, your role is equally vital. Create space for these voices, amplify rather than appropriate. Listen, truly listen when Black women speak, because their liberation is inextricably bound with your own. The revolution won't be televised, but it will be published. It will be spoken. It will be lived in boardrooms, in classrooms, in publishing houses, and public policy, in every space where Black women dare to transform their pain into prosperity. As Audre Lorde powerfully stated, when we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard or welcomed. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak. The question isn't whether your story matters, it does. The question is, will you be brave enough to tell it? And will you create a world where all stories, especially those that have been systematically silenced, can finally be heard? Your answer to that question doesn't just shape your future, it shapes our collective destiny. Choose wisely, choose boldly, choose now.